All right, let's dive in. Today, we are cracking open the massive, complicated rulebook for our planet, the system of international law. It's what dictates how countries are supposed to get along, or, what happens when they don't. This whole story is about ancient pacts, devastating wars, and this constant, ongoing quest to create a more orderly world.
I mean, really think about that for a second. You've got 195 countries, all with their own cultures, their own economies, their own political systems. How does the world not just descend into total, constant chaos? Well, the answer, or at least the attempt at an answer, is this incredible, complex system of rules that we've all built together over centuries.
And that system has a name: public international law. The best way to think about it is like it's the operating system for the entire globe. It's the code that's running in the background, shaping everything from trade and travel to war and peace. Honestly, its story is really the story of our modern world.
So, where did all this even start? Let's wind the clock all the way back to the very foundation, to the first pacts and the earliest promises made between kingdoms and states.
This timeline right here is basically our roadmap. We're going to start way back in ancient times with the first treaties and customs. Then we'll see how the absolute trauma of World War I led to this radical new idea, the League of Nations. From there, we'll jump to 1945 and the birth of the United Nations, and finally, we'll land right here, in the present, to talk about the crazy new challenges this system is facing.
So in the very beginning, it was all about handshakes, promises, and shared customs. But the real game changer, the moment that laid the foundation for everything, was in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia. Now, this wasn't just any treaty. It ended decades of brutal war in Europe and introduced this revolutionary idea of state sovereignty, the principle that each nation gets to control what happens within its own territory. And that right there is still the absolute bedrock of international law today.
For centuries, this system of sovereign states and one-off agreements, well, it kind of worked, more or less. But then came the unbelievable devastation of World War I. The world knew something had to change, fundamentally. And that led to a really bold global experiment.
The League of Nations was born with one single primary mission: to make sure a war like that could never happen again. Its big idea was something called collective security. This notion that an attack on one member country was an attack on all of them. For the first time ever, the world wasn't just relying on these shifting alliances. It was actually trying to build a permanent institution dedicated to global peace. But, as we all know, the League, it ultimately failed. It didn't have its own army to enforce its decisions, and some of the world's biggest powers, like the United States, never even joined. So, from the ashes of the Second World War that it couldn't prevent, something new rose up, something designed to be a true game-changer.
1945. The world is in ruins. But out of that wreckage comes this incredibly powerful determination to build a better future. Representatives from 50 countries met in San Francisco, and they created the United Nations. This moment marked a profound shift in how the entire world thought about cooperation and security.
Now, this is what's so important to get. The UN didn't just pick up where the League left off. It dramatically expanded the whole mission. It championed the idea of universal human rights, which led directly to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. And it created all these new bodies to foster real, practical cooperation. Think the World Health Organization, UNESCO, things like that. So yeah, this wasn't just League of Nations 2.0. It was a total rewrite of the global rules. For the very first time, how a country treated its own citizens became a matter of international concern. The UN Charter basically hardwired concepts like human dignity and shared progress right into the DNA of global law. And that brings us to today. I mean, the world of 1945 looks nothing like our world, and international law is scrambling to keep up. It's facing a completely new frontier of challenges that nobody back then could have ever imagined. Just think about it for a second. Issues like climate change and cyber warfare, they don't care about borders. You can't build a wall high enough to stop carbon emissions, right? That's why we have things like the Paris Accord. You can't unplug your country from a potential cyber attack. These are truly global problems, and they demand brand new kinds of legal solutions.
And what's really fascinating now is how this whole framework has grown beyond its original purpose. It doesn't just govern how states talk to each other anymore. Through things like the International Criminal Court, international law now holds individuals accountable for things like war crimes and genocide. It's actively shaping a global conversation about ethics, about what we as a planet decide is just fundamentally right and wrong.
So, here's the key takeaway. International law isn't some dusty old book sitting on a shelf. It's a living, breathing system. It's constantly being debated, challenged, and reshaped. Every single time the UN Security Council meets, every time a new climate treaty gets negotiated, that evolution is happening right in front of our eyes.
And that leaves us with this huge, fascinating question. As we face down the challenges of everything from AI governance to regulating outer space, that global rulebook is still being written. So, what do you think? What does the next chapter of international law even look like? What new rules will our future demand?